At Samuel Green's funeral, which was held in private because it was only attended by a pastor, his wife, and his bodyguard, an unforeseen disaster will begin. In the same cemetery area not far from the location of Samuel Green's funeral, there is a girl named Isabel who is usually called Bird, came with her uncle Roger to visit the grave of her long-dead parents. Bird brought a camera left by her parents. The girl really likes taking pictures. She quietly sneaked and hid from behind a tree to see and take pictures of the funeral procession. But this idle act actually made Bird get a picture of a terrible incident that would soon threaten her life. As she took a photo, a bullet suddenly hit the pastor's body, making him die instantly, followed by another bullet that hit Samuel Green's wife's bodyguard. The situation became tense. Bird stood behind a tree stiffly. She didn't know how to act. But clearly, she was terrified because she witnessed the murder in front of her. In the midst of her fear, Bird had photographed the face of the perpetrator who had removed his mask. She intended to immediately return to the city to report the incident. But when she got to the car to take her uncle away, it turned out that Roger was not there. That man went to the cemetery to look up Bird. This situation made Bird panic. She tried to chase her uncle, but it was too late, because Roger had met with the hitman and was shot right in the head. Bird panicked even more when the killer realized her existence too, and prepared to kill. With all her might she ran away, securing a camera that would become evidence of a big crime. Not far from the funeral, there is a farmhouse that Carter owns. He used to live with his wife and son who now seems to have died. Carter had intended to commit suicide that day after he wrote his last letter. But his plan failed when he heard a cry for help from Bird. Carter came out of his house and asked what had happened. Meanwhile, Bird couldn't answer. She was very scared and tried to get into Carter's house. That's when a bullet managed to hit Carter's leg. He realized what was hunting the girl, a terrible danger that would also soon threaten his life. Carter finally got into the house too when another shot was fired at him. This time Carter managed to dodge. He went into the house, went upstairs, took his shotgun which only had 2 bullets left. When the killer entered, Carter managed to get off one shot which hit the killer in the left abdomen. After that, in order to use the last bullet at the right moment, Carter just bullied the killer into leaving by threatening to call the police. The problem was that the house phone was off and Carter's cell phone was left downstairs. He could not have made the emergency call. The killer wanted to negotiate. He wanted to kill Bird and would release Carter if Bird was given to him. This negotiation was made because Carter did not see the killer's face. So he survived because the killer would only eliminate people who saw his real face. Dilemma churned in Carter's chest. He couldn't possibly hand Bird over to the crazed killer. But their conditions were not at all favorable for saving themselves or seeking help. Carter's house is also very remote. There would be no neighbors to hear the commotion going on in the house. And of course no one to help them. Insistence after insistence continued to be issued by the killer for Carter to hand over Bird. But he instead vowed to protect the girl, risking his life. Carter is given time to think by the killer. Will he hand over the girl or start a bloodbath with the killer? Carter was actually not afraid. After all, he had originally intended to kill himself if Bird did not come to him. So during the time given by the killer, he asked Bird to take a first aid kit to bandage the wound on his leg, so that he could stay to protect Bird longer. Meanwhile downstairs, the killer was trying to stop the bleeding in his stomach due to a shotgun bullet from Carter. Carter and the killer were both trying to make their blood stop in extreme ways, which made them have to endure tremendous pain in their bodies. After Carter finished and took the pain medication, he told Bird to get the box with the light bulbs in it. Although confused by Carter's plan, Bird complied with his request. She took the lights and towels, where Carter then broke all the lights, then threw them on the stairs. This would let him know if the killer was trying to climb up the stairs, because the shards of glass would make a sound. When that was done, the killer seemed to realize that Carter was not a farmer like he thought before. He was smarter to set a strategy for the size of a farmer. While waiting for the killer's next move, Carter asked about Bird's background. The girl then told him that she was an orphan. Her parents died in a car accident and made her have to live with her aunt. Bird also then tells why she finally came to Carter's place, and how she saw people in the cemetery killed by the bullets of the man who was preparing to take their lives. Bird, who knows that the bullet left in Carter's hand is only one bullet, it will be their last chance that will determine whether the two will be able to survive or not. But Carter calms Bird by saying that the killer doesn't know that. They can still be safe, although they need to think of a way to bully the killer. Bird had actually asked Carter to leave through the window, But Carter, with his injured leg, it was impossible to escape. He instead offered Bird to go alone. But if that was done, she would not be protected by Carter anymore because he was unable to do it outside the house. And that's what the killer wanted. The opportunity to eliminate Bird. Carter asked Bird to be patient, at least until help might arrive. Bird saw Carter as a good person. She felt safe with Carter around and allowed him to call her Bird. A name that only her parents were allowed to call her. After this, Bird told him that she had a photo of the hitman's face on her camera. This would be a good opportunity for Carter. He asked that the roll of camera film be handed over to him. Without hesitation, Bird handed it over. But the roll of film was about to fall, when the killer suddenly shouted, asking why many things were packed on the first floor, and also questioned the whereabouts of Carter's family. As long as he was babbling, Carter was busy securing the roll of film. The thing was put in a metal tube and then airtight plastic. And he asked Bird to hide the roll of film in the toilet tank. Downstairs, the hitman found a photo of Carter in military garb posing with his wife and son. He spoke of Carter's wife and son, which successfully provoked that man's emotions. Carter yelled at the killer to shut up. But the bad man just kept raving to persuade Carter to hand over Bird, and they could return to their respective families without bloodshed. Carter refused to hand over Bird. He instead told the killer to just go home, leave their place. An offer that, of course, the killer refused. Actually, the two of them can't linger in that house. Carter and the killer are both badly wounded. They could die of blood loss or infection from their gunshot wounds. The killer refuses to leave. He thinks about burning down Carter's house with that man and that girl in it. Being unafraid, he bluffs and threatens the killer with a picture of his face that the girl has. The picture of his face could be evidence to drag the killer to jail. This fact pisses the killer off. He threatens to dismember Carter's body if he gets him. Meanwhile, outside, a sheriff on patrol finds two cars parked on the side of the road. He stopped and checked the conditions around. Back at Carter's house, the man was preoccupied with flashback images of his son who accidentally died, as a result of falling on top of farm equipment that Carter had not tidied up. The memory was so tormenting Carter. In a huge sense of guilt, he then told Bird to get the alcoholic drinks he kept in the attic. When he went upstairs, Bird found a photo of Carter's late son and took his teddy bear. Carter doesn't say anything. Moments later, the killer finds a note belonging to Carter. He finds out that Carter was negligent in taking care of his son until he made him killed. This makes Carter feel uncomfortable, uneasy, because the wound about his son is reopened by the killer who reads the message. The killer mocks Carter. He knows that there is a suicide plan that Carter wants to do. He teases him to kill himself so that the killer can eliminate Bird faster. Carter refused. He ignored the killer's ramblings. Meanwhile, at the funeral, the sheriff had found a grave that was still open and had not been completed. He called whoever was responsible for the incident, but there was no answer at all. It seemed that the sheriff had not found Roger's body, which was located not far from the gravesite. At Carter's house, the situation was still tense. When Bird and Carter were talking about their families, Carter promised that he would not let Bird get caught by the killer. As the hitman fired his gun into the ceiling of the house to startle Carter, the gunshot was heard by the sheriff, who immediately went to the origin of the sound. The lights in the house began to dim. Carter remembered that he hadn't refueled the generator in the basement. He couldn't possibly protect the two of them in the dark, so he planned to get Bird out of the house without the killer noticing. The sheriff saw Carter's house and felt anxious that something bad was wrong there. He reported to his commander about his purpose and started approaching Carter's house by car. Carter and Bird didn't know about the sheriff's arrival. Carter was busy getting Bird out of the window. The sheriff was shot as he knocked on the door. But before the killer completely took his life, he saw Bird trying to escape. His attention was distracted for a moment and focused on chasing Bird. But failed, because Bird immediately returned to the second floor. The killer returned to approach the sheriff. He made him pass out by hitting him with the end of a gun that was out of bullets. Afterward, the killer hid the police car in a cottage some distance from the main house. When the killer wanted to go back into the house, Carter held him outside by pointing his gun at the killer and telling him to leave. It was actually a bluff. Carter knew that his bullets wouldn't be able to reach the killer. And unfortunately, the killer also knew that. The killer dared Carter to shoot him, and guessed that Carter only had one last bullet in his gun. A guess that was not at all off. Carter's bluff didn't work. He actually had to retreat when the killer took the gun in his pocket. The gun was the gun taken from the sheriff. The killer then re-entered the house. He also began torturing the sheriff to negotiate with Carter. This new negotiation was in exchange for the sheriff and Bird. Carter was confused, but he refused to give up Bird. Forced for several minutes, Carter had to listen to the torture carried out by the killer by breaking 8 sheriff's fingers. After all his fingers were broken, the killer shot the sheriff in the head after bullying Carter, who continued to refuse the deal. His corpse was then pushed to the front of the stairs to be shown to Carter, who was immediately shocked by the gruesome scene. After a few moments of silence, Carter pretended to offer Bird because he had to go to the hospital. But before he went downstairs, Carter told Bird to hide in the bathroom and lock the door. When Carter got downstairs, he only found the boots of the killer and realized that the man had sneaked upstairs barefoot. Carter decides to sneak upstairs through the window as well. The killer is shocked once he realizes Carter is already behind him with gunpoint. He gets off one shot before falling down the stairs due to stepping on a shard of lamp. The two of them are again stuck in a deadlock of a deal that never happened. The killer initially thought of setting fire to the house, but reconsidered his plan and thought of another idea that would frighten Carter more. When night falls and it gets dark, the two wounded and tired men talk to each other. The killer is actually waiting for someone to arrive. He has called Carter's wife. And indeed, some time later, a vehicle arrives in front of the house. Carter realized that it was his wife, Mara. She was immediately taken hostage by the killer, who offered to barter for his wife. Carter went downstairs, but not with Bird. He apparently gave the girl a gun, and told her to keep aiming down the stairs and shoot if she saw the hitman. Angry because Carter came down alone, the hitman shot Carter in the knee. As they argued, Bird finally came down the stairs to protect Carter. The generator ran out of power. The flashing lights were about to go out. This outwitted the killer and allowed Carter to find an opportunity to attack him. Carter stabs the assassin repeatedly in the neck. But then, the assassin shoots Carter just as the lights finally go out. Mara ran out and called 911, while Bird approached the dying hitman. He told Bird to shoot him. But when the trigger was pressed, there was only a click because all Carter had was a blank bullet. Feeling ridiculous about his misfortune, the killer finally refused to kill Bird because he had come to his death. Bird then ran over to Carter, who she thought was dead too. But it turns out Carter is still alive. Mara also returned inside, and the three of them gathered again. So what do you think about this movie? If you like it, please click like and leave a comment for this video. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a video from Allo Recaps. See you next video.